All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Mike Chase Show. That sounds so egotistical saying that, but I'm trying to come up with ideas on how to do this. This is very early of me doing this. I've again, I haven't really done anything like this ever in my YouTube career, if that's even what you want to call it. But yeah, here we are. It is May 22nd, 2026 here. And yeah, I did no prep for this. Like, I normally don't do prep for many things in my life. I probably should. But yeah, what's the show going to be? Just me talking sports, things in the news, things I want to talk about, things that I see on Twitter that annoy me. If you do follow me on Twitter, you know there are things that get kind of stuck in my craw every now and then that I end up talking about. How long will the show be? I don't know. It could be 20 minutes, could be 30 minutes, I could rant for an hour about one thing. I don't really know. That's the beauty of the internet. You can just kind of upload whatever you want on here. So, yeah. So, first thing I do want to talk about here today, though, does come from NASCAR, and that is Kyle Busch dying at 41. I don't believe we have an official cause of death just yet. I'm sure that'll take time and the family and things like that. So, it doesn't really matter because this was a guy who was literally just competing last week. I mean, won a Truck Series race last week. I believe it might have been either today, it might have been last week. He just won a Truck Series race. Um, and that is just brutal. Brutal news. I was at a movie, saw Grogu in The Mandalorian or Mandalorian Grogu, whatever, doesn't matter. Saw it, you know, had my phone off, didn't turn my phone on until I got home, and the first thing I see is Kyle Busch dead at 41, and that's just unbelievable to me to see that. I mean, that is just not something you expect to see. Um, that's just it's horrible news. Um, this is I think one of the most shocking deaths in NASCAR, not since Dale Earnhardt. And that was in competition. That was during the Daytona 500. I was a child. I was watching that race, but again, as a kid, very long race. I fell asleep, and then I woke up, and then my mom told me like Dale Earnhardt's dead, and I was like, "What? Like what happened?" And it's like it was a crash. I was like, I even then I couldn't that just was so weird to me. I couldn't process that. And this is even tougher to process because this was someone who, again, like I said, was just competing, was just racing a week ago. Did have a medical issue at Watkins Glen, has been dealing with like some sinus stuff from our understanding. So some people are speculating it might have been meningitis, something like that. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I'm definitely not going to give you my medical opinion on anything. I legitimately have no clue about that stuff. Um, and so that's just horrible news. Uh, Kyle Busch, I think, was one of the last true, I think, villains of the sport. And when Kyle Busch, I think, understood there was a benefit for him to be in that role as the villain of the sport, to wear the black hat, if you will. Some drivers try to do that, but they still want to be loved, right? It takes a lot, I think, for someone to want to be hated and vilified and booed and cheered against. Kyle Busch had no problem doing that. He had no problem being that for the sport, and he was one of the best drivers. I mean, I remember watching him in the then Bush series. Um, and you could tell the talent from there. You can tell this guy's going to win championships at the Cup Series level. He did. He won a ton of races, 63 races, won, I believe, his 69th truck race this past last week. Over 200 wins across all three top series of NASCAR. One of the best to ever do it. First ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best drivers. I don't know if he was on the tail end of his career. I know it felt like that. I just felt like the current equipment he was in with RCR kind of just wasn't able to compete at the level that I think Kyle wanted to compete at, which is, wins, races, championships, things like that. That's what Kyle was about. One of the most fierce competitors on a racetrack. Didn't take much to, I think, upset him on a racetrack. There's been many occasions where someone does something that, doesn't seem that bad and he'll just absolutely junk him. He has no problem, had no problem doing that. It's so weird to talk about him like in the past tense like that still. That doesn't really feel real. Um, and yeah, it's just strange to me. Kyle Busch, I felt like was one of the last holdovers from NASCAR's boom period, right? Kind of that. he was kind of in that in between era, not with like Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano. I feel like Kyle Busch was kind of in still kind of with like the Kevin Harvicks and Jimmy Johnsons of the world, those guys. He was kind of in between that crossover, if you will. That's what Kyle was, I think, to NASCAR. And it's just strange that, we're not going to have an actual farewell season for Kyle Busch. Now we're going to actually see an actual retirement from him. Still running in the Truck Series. Who knows? I think he would have ended up being an owner one day. Sucks for his kids. I know that one of the things that you saw, if you've noticed Kyle Busch over the past few years in a lot of interviews, he almost seemed more proud of the progress that his son Brexton was making in racing, and looking forward to, I think, competing with him one day in the Truck Series. I think that's something that Kyle seemed really excited about. Not necessarily his own career anymore, but more about his son's career and his path going forward in NASCAR. And that's just brutal for the family, for his wife and his kids. That's just awful that they're not going to have their father anymore. And it just sucks, Kyle Busch. Oh, when Kyle Busch is in the mix, when Kyle Busch is running up front the few times he did at RCR, things are always more exciting when a driver like that is up front, racing for wins and things like that. So, yeah, not a fun way to start the show, but I had to talk about it. Yeah, Kyle Busch, absolutely gonna miss watching that guy race, and yeah, just sucks. Honestly, sucks that he's not gonna be here anymore. Okay, so another thing we have to talk about here today, Aaron Rodgers, we all know, coming back for his final season. He has confirmed this is going to be his final season. Maybe, I feel like if the Steelers do really well, and if there's still that allure of like, hey, maybe we're a year away, maybe we're some moves away, I wouldn't be shocked if he comes back for another year, but I do kind of take him at his word here. This will likely be it for Aaron Rodgers. I'm not just talking about Aaron Rodgers here or the Steelers or anything like that. This is more Michael Wilbon and his kind of just very weird responses to Aaron Rodgers here these past couple days. One day he said, "Oh, he's completely irrelevant. Why are we even talking about this? This guy, just this weird anger, this weird energy that you see, I think, from a lot of journalists towards Aaron Rodgers is very odd. Doesn't make a lot of sense because they don't have this energy for Deshaun Watson, even a guy who raped multiple women. They don't have this energy for guys like Rashee Rice. They don't have this energy for guys like Tyreek Hill, who beats women, abuses women. Rashee Rice running his car into people. I don't even know if they're going to have this energy for Henry Ruggs when he eventually makes his way back to the NFL. This is a guy who killed a woman, drunk driving. They don't have this energy for those guys. But they do have this energy for Aaron Rodgers, which I think is very fascinating. And always, it's the way he's holding the media hot. You guys talk about him like he's not holding anyone hot. You guys come up with this stuff. You guys make a story out of this every year. He's not the one making it a story. You are. You make it a story every year. But it's not even that, I don't think. I think for Wilbon, I really like Michael Wilbon, I think. I think one of the things I've always liked about Michael Wilbon is I always felt I was getting his true, honest opinion, right? I always felt like I was getting what he actually felt watching PTI. That was one of my favorite shows as a kid. Coming home from school, turning on ESPN, I would look forward to PTI. I really enjoyed that show with Kornheiser and Wilbon. That's just a great show. I always felt like both of them, you didn't agree with everything they said, but you always felt like they gave good arguments for everything they said. They always made sense with everything they said. And for Wilbon here with his weird thing with Aaron Rodgers, I'm not like, he doesn't even touch I'm sorry, Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback than John. I'm sorry, you didn't watch John. I know I didn't, but Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen play. Sorry. This isn't about play. This isn't about taking the media hostage. This isn't about being a bad guy. No, it's not about that. This is Wilbon, in my opinion. I still think Michael Wilbon, this comes back to COVID. Again, like I said previously, I'm not a medical, I'm fat, okay? So I'm definitely not a medical expert on anything. So please, I'm not. This doesn't help again with that damn flag back there. That's not, again, I always have to point out, that's not an American flag. That's an MJF pro wrestling merchandise flag thing. I will get a different thing over there so I can stop referencing this all the time. That's an MJF American flag, big Hebrew. We love MJF in this household. This all comes back to COVID. I still think Michael Wilbon is mad that Aaron Rodgers didn't take the vaccine. He is still really angry about that. But I think Michael Wilbon knows if he says his main issue with Aaron Rodgers, and I think a lot of these journalists who I think fall in the same kind of political spectrum as someone like Michael Wilbon, they know if they kind of come out and say that, most people are like, really? You're that much of a fucking dork loser? You're still mad about that? It's 2026. You're still angry about that? You're still mad about that. And also for anyone, because I'm like, oh, are you like an anti-vaxxer? I still have this stupid thing in my wallet. This is my wallet here. Let me make sure I don't have my name, because you jagoffs don't know my real actual name. I still have in my wallet my vaccination record. Okay? I got the 2 shots of the Pfizer. Okay? So for anyone, I really have to check my ass and all my bases with this stuff, I feel like, now that I'm like doing this. So no, I'm not some anti-vaxxer. That's not a, MAGA flag back there behind me. That's nothing like that. This is a case of, in my opinion, Michael Wilbon, I think, still being mad, still being angry, still being upset that Aaron Rodgers didn't get a vaccine. But Wilbon knows if he comes out and says that's why he's holds a grudge against Aaron, he's not even doing it from like a Bears fan perspective, which could be the easy out for him, right? But Wilbon knows that seems a little too childish. So he has to, try to go with this like historical context type of thing. But that doesn't make sense. Really. When you really think about it, even that really doesn't make sense. This is strictly, I'm mad that he didn't get the vaccine, but he knows if Wilbon's smart. Wilbon's one of the smartest minds, I think, in all of sports journalism, sports media. This guy was doing it while he's been doing it for over 40, 50 years. This guy's been one of the leading sports journalists, pundits, whatever you want to call it. Nothing but respect for Wilbon, everything he's done. But I do think here, again, what I mentioned earlier, what I've always liked about Wilbon is that I always felt like I was getting his real opinion. I wasn't getting, something gussied up by a producer or anything like that. I didn't feel like I was getting a fake bullshit narrative from him. I never felt like that. But and this one is where like you kind of feel like you do get that, right? Where it's very obvious, like you're not getting a true opinion, because the way he talks about it doesn't make any sense, really. It just seems like none of it's my phone going off. None of it's based in reality, really, is what I guess I feel. It's very strange. I don't really understand it. Again, like I said, I feel it comes back to the COVID thing. And I think there's a lot of people who are a lot of sports journalists who, these are highly educated people. They come from, rich families usually. And they still hold a grudge about people not taking the vaccine or whatever. For me, again, I just showed you my fucking vaccination card. I went down to the, now I look like an idiot. Like I went down to the Milwaukee, it used to be the U.S. American Airlines Center, whatever. The convention center we have here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That's where I went before they redid it, and now it's the Baird Center, or whatever the hell they're calling it, or whatever. It's really fancy now. It's very nice. They wouldn't let a bum like me in there, but it's very nice. But it was before they did that construction project. Went down there the first time, and I think the second time I went down, it was like military people had like taken over the whole operation. So, yeah. Went down there, got my shots, whatever. I didn't, by the time the football, which is really weird to think about with people still holding that grudge against Aaron Rodgers for not getting vaccinated. This is a funny thing about this too. I've still seen, there's some people think like he was the cause of the outbreak of COVID in like the Packers locker room. And it wasn't in that 2021 season. I believe it was actually Devontae Adams, a guy who was vaccinated. Like that, like by the time football season rolled around, I think everyone was like, oh, yeah, you're gonna have to keep getting these shots forever. And everyone was like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Talking about like media gaslighting. It's like, we never said it was 2 shots and you're done. I was like, no, I remember you pretty much saying 2 shots and we can all get on with this. So like, oh, well, it's actually 4 shots. It might be 6. Again, not an expert. I'm not, if you're someone with like pre-existing conditions or if you're old, like Michael Wilbon is, see, this is where this comes back into it. I think the reason what made Wilbon so mad is I think Wilbon being an old man, which makes sense, right? If you're an old person, you really don't want to get COVID, or any sort of respiratory illness like that can take you out like that. You'd be really shocked how quickly a respiratory illness can take you out. You can go from being fine in the morning to being on a slab before the 6 o'clock news is on. That's how fast it can go. And I totally understand that. But I think Wilbon is, phone just keeps going off here, misdirecting some of his anger here. And I think he should be a little more upfront about his reasoning. I always feel like you should be upfront with how you feel. I don't respect people who kind of hide their actual feelings about people like this. Like what Aaron Rodgers is going to come punch Michael Wilbon in the face if he comes and says like, I'm mad that he didn't get the vaccine and that's my issue with him. It's like, if he would, like, he'd be like, all right, well, that's your issue with me. But for whatever reason, Wilbon's not willing to say that. And I don't know why. It's very strange. Wilbon, you're too, he's not going to see this. You're too grown to be like gossiping like a teenage girl about a 41-year-old man like this. Just say that you're mad that he didn't get the vaccine. You're still angry about that because for you, an old man could easily die of COVID, which is true. An old man like you could easily die of COVID. It's very possible. But like to bring it to football, I think it's just weird. Again, it's another instance of ESPN and these like pundits now where it's off the field, but it's weird to say off the field stuff, Greg, because like my issue with Deshaun Watson is he's a rapist. He sexually abuses women. He shouldn't be playing in the NFL. I hope he blows out his Achilles again. I would laugh if he blows out his Achilles again. I would love if he blew out his Achilles. I also hope he blows out his entire knee while he's blowing out his Achilles, and while he's in the process of blowing out his entire leg, I hope someone helmets him right on the crown of the helmet, right here, and he gets a serious concussion. I have no problem saying that, right? I have no problem saying that. Those are my true feelings right there. I have no problem saying it. What's Deshaun Watson going to do? I'm not a massage therapist, so he's not going to do anything to me. So there's that. Again, say what you say and stand behind it when you say it. But you come up here, you act like almost like a little girl, like a little boy or something like that. I think it's really unbecoming of Michael Wilbon. He kind of just comes off as a joke here. And I don't think Michael Wilbon should ever come off as a joke. I think Michael Wilbon should be one of the most respected figures, I think, in all of sports, in my opinion. And he doesn't come off as that right now. He comes off as, I think, a petulant little child who has this grudge that he knows is childish, a grudge that he knows would be embarrassing if he actually came out and said, this is my grudge with Aaron Rodgers here. I think Wilbon should be honest. I think he should say what he says or say what he actually feels and not come with these weird arguments and things like that. It's just weird. It looks childish. It looks unbecoming of someone who I think has been a leading voice in sports media, sports journalism for the better part all of my life and all of my adult life at the very least, probably for the past 35 plus years. It's just completely unbecoming. And if you see the segment, everyone's like, what are you talking? Everyone genuinely looks confused. You see the reaction on Twitter. You have a few people like, oh, you guys don't belong. John Elway, he said eventually, Aaron Rodgers nowhere near John Elway's level. And I was like, what are you talking? You have a few people who are still like John Elway truthers. Cool. You just can't look at stats. It's like, well, I can look at games and things like that. And he was terrible in a lot of big games for most of his career. So, I mean, I don't know. Both guys at their same age, you look at it, even the league did start to eventually become a little bit more passing heavy in the late 90s. Aaron Rodgers still blows away John Elway. Aaron Rodgers at the age 40 with the Steelers last year probably had some throws that John Elway couldn't make at 20. So sorry, Aaron Rodgers is a better athlete than John Elway, has a better arm than John Elway, is a better quarterback than John Elway. And that doesn't take away from how great John Elway was in his own right. That's not an insult towards John Elway. So very strange, very weird. Don't know why he's doing that, but Michael Wilbon knocked it off. Come on, you're better than this. You're a grown man. Let's not be childish here. Okay, so NBA playoff action we have to talk about here, and really the Thunder Spurs series. I think everyone knew this was probably going to be out of these conference finals. I think everyone kind of knew this series had the potential to be a bit of a dogfight. I am checking my phone right now for something, and it's really turning out to be, I think, the best series here, right? Compared to what we saw compared to the Cavs and Knicks, where I just think the Knicks are, I think they're probably going to sweep the Cavs here. I think there's a very good chance this Spurs Thunder series goes 7 games. Now, that could be really good for the Knicks, could be really bad for the simple fact that you kind of have this weird long layoff in between, the conference finals and the finals if you do end up sweeping this Cavaliers team. The Cavs can easily, we've seen them be able to put up points. They blew game one, so they probably should already have a game under their belt. But we'll have to wait and see again for game, 3 and everything else, kind of see how that's going to go. I do feel pretty confident about the Knicks winning that series. But the Spurs and Thunder, I mean, both of those games have been absolutely amazing. I mean, Victor Wembanyama was so much fun to watch. Shea, fun to watch when he's not, flopping around. And just, it was really interesting watching the Thunder. And there's always this discussion of ethical hoops. And it definitely does feel like the Thunder don't fall into that category of, ethical hoops, if you will. It's very interesting. You watch them. It's just like there's always something just off, is the best way to put it, right? There's always just some kind of fuck shit. Sorry for swearing. I do swear. There's always just some weird like fuck stuff going on with them. There's always just some weird flops. There's always some embellishment. There's just always, it just feels like that team is like designed in a lab. Like, how can we abuse NBA officials being incompetent? Right? And it feels like that's like, how can we abuse this? How can we abuse the way the game is meant to be called by officials? And it always feels like that with them. And it's the one like thing that I think that keeps this team, I think, from being really embraced. I think it's the one thing that really keeps even Shea from being embraced. Because if you really watch Shea, SGA, if you really go out and watch him, he really is an amazing player. The shot making ability, the weird angles he's able to kind of make these shots at times, the leaning, it doesn't really matter if he has like perfect balance around it. He's still able to make these shots, the ability to get to the rim, all of those things, the playmaking ability he has. These are things that should be, I think, really, I think for anyone else, these would almost be lauded. But it feels like it's in the broader discussion of the NBA, it kind of gets lost because it's the foul baiting. It's, I think it's the things that kind of took away from James Harden a little bit at times, really. James Harden in his prime, really great player. Again, we come back to this Cavs series, just feels like defensively he gets targeted a lot. At times the offense kind of sputters a little bit with him. It just kind of feels like in the big moments, James Harden kind of has always come up short in spectacular fashion, right? And SGA is like kind of like the opposite of that we're seeing, it feels like, right? I mean, game one, I feel like the Thunder probably should have took that game, and they kind of gave it away with some of the turnovers and things like that. And SGA, I think, came out and, kind of put his foot down late in that game, really, I felt like he really kind of was like, no, we're still here. This isn't going to be, it's the era of the Spurs and Wembanyama. It's like, no, you're going to have to go through us. And you kind of felt that response from that Thunder team that you definitely wanted to see. And I also think it's a response that I think, to me, just kind of affirms, like, I think this series is going 7. I think this is going to be a drag-out series. Now, granted, who knows? Thunder could just take over. I think they've been in position to clearly win. I mean, granted, both teams, I think you could make an argument, both teams in this series, the Thunder should be up 2-0, and really, maybe you can make an argument the Spurs should be up 2-0. But I just feel like, in terms of an entire game, I feel like for the most part, I feel like the Thunder have played a better game, right? What sucks about that, though, is it's like, it's all the other stuff they do. It's the foul baiting. It's all that stuff that just gets really annoying. I think for a lot of fans, it's like, it's the stuff like that where you're watching, it's like, why do you have to do that? Why do you have to do that? Why do you have to do all that extra stuff that just, you're already great, you're already awesome, but then you do the extra stuff that just ruins it for everyone. So it's one of those things that I think is just really annoying, but I think for the most part, Western Conference Final has totally delivered. I think I expected this series to be probably the best one, and it clearly has delivered there. Knicks, Cavs, you know, it feels like there's just more, which is really weird, right? Because you always hear about, New York, it's the Mecca, it's this and that. But I feel like the eyes of the basketball world really are paying attention to the Spurs and Thunder more. Because I feel like the prevailing thought is that, and I think it's the right thought, honestly. I think whoever comes out of the Western Conference I think they're going to have a cakewalk. I think they're going to have a cakewalk in the NBA Finals. I just don't see either of these Eastern Conference teams beating any of these teams in the West right now. These top two teams, which are the Spurs and Thunder, I just don't see it. I really don't. I think the better players are on those teams. I just think they are. And I think the deeper teams are the Western Conference teams. I know some people disagree. Again, you never know what could happen. Someone could pull a hamstring or whatever. You never know. Injuries play a part in these series. The attrition plays a part in these series. When you get this deep into a playoff run, these guys are starting to run on fumes. But I think we've seen what the Thunder is. These guys are playing their best basketball. It also helps out a lot that they have a lot of depth, right? They can go pretty deep. And so I think that kind of helps them. I feel like other teams can't necessarily go as deep like the Spurs can, or like the Spurs can. I think that's why they're giving them the best test of these playoffs right now, is because the Spurs can kind of match that, right? Both of these teams, the Thunder and Spurs, if we're being entirely honest, were built on tanking, which is really funny because now Adam Silver pulling that rung up on everyone else. So, you gotta love it. You let two behemoths get built in the Western Conference in San Antonio and Oklahoma City. And, now it's time to pull the rung up on everyone else. So go figure, right? I mean, that's just how the NBA operates at times. You know what I mean? Just really stupid, but you know what? It is what it is. I have to say, I've been enjoying the series right now. I haven't really watched too much of the Knicks and Cavs series just because, I don't enjoy watching James Harden play basketball. It's not a particular treat. And, it's the Knicks. I find the Knicks completely annoying, honestly. I wonder if that's more of me finding their fans annoying, if I'm being honest. I find the fans more annoying than the Knicks themselves. I actually really like Karl Anthony Towns, Jalen Brunson, really good player. It's kind of funny when you think about it, like, boy, the Mavericks, they maybe should have just kept the core of Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic together, because they'd be right in the mix fighting for championships probably. But hey, I believe Brunson not being a Maverick, I wonder, did that still, I'm forgetting the time, did that happen more under Mark Cuban before he sold the team? I don't really remember. I probably should check this, but either way, I think the Knicks, they look pretty. I think the Knicks, from what I've seen, I think they look far and away, I think the team that is probably going to come out of the East here. I don't think the Cavs are going to overcome a 2-game deficit here. I just don't see it. I feel like that's asking a lot out of Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. I don't think those are guys that can do that sort of thing. I always feel like James Harden, even in his prime, always felt like he was a guy that needed a guy better than him if you were going to win a championship with James Harden. And he needed to be better by a substantial amount, right? Always felt that way. Which is why I think the closest James Harden really did ever come to a championship was when Chris Paul was kind of on those teams with him in Houston. Um, and again, that almost happened. They almost got super close, and you know, wasn't close enough. Donovan Mitchell, really good player. I think is a star player. I don't think he's a superstar player because if he was a superstar player, a superstar, I think, no disrespect to the Knicks, I think the Knicks also have a bunch of like star players on their team, but they just have star players. I don't think there's a superstar on the Knicks. And if Donovan Mitchell was a real superstar, he'd be dominating the series right now. He and the Cavs would be up over the Knicks. And that's simply not the case. I think that's just kind of confirmation of who Donovan Mitchell is and who he's not. And again, the playoffs, the NBA playoffs, I think every playoff really, for the most part, the playoffs kind of confirm who you are as a player and where your standing actually is as a player, where your standing actually is as a team. I think that always gets revealed. Barring injury, of course, you always have to think about injury, but Donovan Mitchell, star, not a superstar, in my opinion, at least. But either way, you never know what could happen. I'm sure, I'm sure the Cavs are going to keep fighting. I expect them to at least win a game in this series. I mean, they were up a bunch in game one and then blew it. So certainly that could happen. They could overcome this deficit. It's certainly possible, but I don't think it'll happen. It could, but I don't think so. And then Spurs Thunder, this feels like a 7-game series to me. It looks like, and I hope it's not a situation where like we get like trading blowouts, right? Because right now we're getting like trading, just a slugfest right now. I hope it doesn't turn into like, okay, we blow you out, then you blow us out. I hope it doesn't turn into that. I hope we just get like 7 awesome games, and because then I think the NBA finals are gonna be filled with blowouts. Because I think regardless if it's the Knicks or Cavs, I think the team in the East is getting their head stomped in by one of these Western Conference behemoths that were built through tanking. And Adam Silver had no problem with it then, but now he has a problem with tanking. If it wasn't, you know what's funny about this? If it wasn't for like the draft lottery, which I hate, and maybe I'll eventually talk about that. If it wasn't for the draft lottery, if I'm correct, I believe Victor Wembanyama would have ended up in Detroit. So it would have been Cade Cunningham and Wembanyama. Which, hey, that would have been pretty cool. Imagine Victor Wembanyama on the Detroit Pistons in the Eastern Conference. You put a big star player like that on a team like Detroit, that'd be pretty cool. But, we have to have a lottery. And, yeah. I'm not a Pistons fan, but I just think that would have been really cool. For whatever reason, I feel like the NBA has set up a system where you always see constant jumping in the lottery of Western Conference teams constantly jump. Very rarely does it feel like we see Eastern Conference teams jump. No, it's always Western Conference teams jumping. Funny how that works, but either way, I don't know. This wasn't supposed to be the lottery segment, but I will eventually talk about the lottery and kind of my thoughts on it. What I would do. Maybe we'll do that next, actually, after this word from my sponsor. I don't actually have any sponsors, so I'm not sure why I said that. It was just funny to say. I always feel like when you listen to a podcast, they always talk about their sponsors like BetterHelp or Bear Mattress or Discovery for Prep or whatever. I always hear about. I don't have any of those, so yeah. Lottery reform. It's kind of an old story now, right? Because for whatever reason, the NBA may decide to make lottery reform the biggest talking point in like January and February and March and April before the playoffs. But I've always felt the draft lottery was a stupid way to kind of hand out picks. I don't really understand it. It's not like a big TV event. It doesn't like get like massive TV ratings. So it's not even like something where it's like, oh, we're getting all this viewership from the draft lottery. I think a few years ago when I did try, sorry for scratching my nose. When I did try doing some real life sports content talking about it, I believe it was shortly after Mike Greenberg on ESPN was really pushing the idea. Again, ESPN, such a weird thing, what it's turned into. But talking about how the NFL should look into having a draft lottery. And it's like, no. Why would the NFL Now, granted, would an NFL draft lottery, would that draw massive ratings? Sure, it probably would. But then you run the risk of certain franchises being bad forever because, again, I feel the negative of a draft lottery, in my opinion, comes down to the fact that you have jumping, that you have teams jumping. And I think that is what really hurts the draft lottery idea for me. I just don't think better teams should not be jumping worse teams for draft picks. The whole point of a draft is to get the best talent to the worst teams first, right? Now, if teams later in the draft, if they find diamonds in the rough, that's on them. That's great scouting. Those are great organizations who are already good, and that's on them for putting in the work that way. But they like in the NBA, we know that a lot of your success gets determined by who your best player is, right? Like this isn't the NFL where, yeah, you can have Patrick Mahomes on your team. You could have Josh Allen on your team. You could have Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, prime Aaron Rodgers. Doesn't matter what you have on your team. If you have bad tackles and bad guards, well, then your quarterback's going to be on his back a bunch. If you have receivers who can't create separation, well, your quarterbacks have to hold on to the football and then force the ball into coverage a little bit more and might throw more interceptions, right? It takes it takes a lot in football to build a winning football team. It takes a bunch. When it comes to, I think, the NBA, it's a little bit easier. Follow me. It's a little bit easier because if you have the NFL equivalent of Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Matthew Stafford, you're pretty much almost guaranteed to get into the playoffs if they stay healthy. Just on that alone, right? Those MVP level players, they can drag a terrible team to the playoffs in the NBA, right? And if you get two really good players on your team, you're a championship contender. You just have to fill in the rest of the spots right there, right? That's kind of how the NBA is, right? Because there's only, 15 roster spots. So one player can determine the fate of your team, your franchise, more so than one player can do it in the NFL, which is why I think having a draft lottery where you constantly have the worst teams potentially not getting the best pick is stupid. It was a gimmick from the 80s when the league was fighting for relevance. You can get rid of it now. It's not needed anymore. We don't need to have a draft lottery. I know there's this idea that, well, if we get rid of it, who cares? If you're the NBA, I don't care if ESPN is angry that you got rid of the draft lottery. That shouldn't be your concern. It's like, well, just run some pregame before a playoff game. What are you complaining about? I know they want to turn it into this like event, right? Because I think Adam Silver, he sees how the NFL can turn everything into an event, right? The NFL can turn a schedule release into this massive event. They've turned the draft into this 3-day extravaganza where almost 1 million plus people will pour into a town to see a bunch of names picked, right? I mean, they've turned it into like a 3-day festival. And I think the NBA sees that and they want a piece of that. They're like, hey, we want that. We want to be able to do something like that. But like it doesn't, like, basketball's different, right? If we're being honest, like they've turned the draft into a 2-day thing. I have no idea why. I really don't know why the NBA draft is 2 days. We don't need day 2 for the second round of the draft. Like we don't. Like there's not, you know what I mean? Like the NBA draft is never going to be something where 1 million plus people pour into a town to be a part of. That's not how the NBA draft works. You know why? Again, watching the whole draft, it's kind of dorky, if we're being honest. But we're all dorks here. We like sports. We nerd out. Some people, it's Magic the Gathering. For us, it's football and basketball and all this other stuff, right? And that's how I view it, in my opinion. Everyone's a nerd about something. We've chosen sports to be nerds about. And maybe some of those other things too, right? I'm sure there's lots of crossover people who love Magic the Gathering, who love the NBA and baseball and things like that. But in my opinion, I don't think the NBA will ever the NBA events can never be that, because if we're being honest, in most drafts, once you get outside of like the sixth or seventh pick, it gets really kind of flip a coin on whether or not someone's going to be a productive NBA player or not. Not let alone productive. Are they going to be a difference maker? Most drafts, once you get outside the first 3 or 4 picks, sometimes it's not even that. It might be just be outside of like the first or second pick. There's really not a difference maker. Some drafts, some people will flat out say, like, I don't think there's a difference maker in this draft at all. It's just a bunch of guys. Who cares? I mean, these guys will be lucky to be good rotation players on a playoff team. It's kind of that way in the NBA. So I think it's going to be. I just don't think you can have the way the league and way the game itself is set up. I don't think you can actually turn the NBA draft into this big event, this multi-day event that the NBA clearly wants it to be. I don't think the draft lottery will ever be this really cool big time thing that just I don't think it can be that, in my opinion. And I feel like just recognizing what your league is and playing to those strengths, is better than trying to be something you're not. You're not going to be the NFL. You're not going to go one-on-one with the NFL in that regard. Your draft is not going to be as exciting as the NFL draft. You know why? Because everyone's seen it. It's really common. You know what I mean? You have those top big time prospects who go in the first round, but everyone knows championship teams are built in the draft through rounds 2 through, like, if we're being really honest, like 2 through like 5, maybe 6, right? Like that's where really the quality of your front office kind of comes in the NFL. Is like, can you find a starting right tackle in the 4th round? The Packers are a team that can do that. Sometimes the Eagles are a team that can do that. And those are teams that have spent the last 10, 20 years constantly in contention, right? If you can it's one thing to find a starting left tackle in the 1st round. Great. I mean, everyone talked about that guy as a 1st round talent. In the NFL, you know what I mean? In the NFL, it's one thing to find, again, like I said, it's one thing to find it in the 1st round, but really, if you can find it in the 4th round, in the 5th round, that's even better. Right? Is there really that in the NBA? I know Nikola Jokic was a 2nd round pick. How often do you see? It's not like even an every draft thing, right? Like it'll be a couple years before you see a 2nd round guy end up becoming like a star player. It doesn't happen that often, right? And I don't think that's by chance. I think it's just, I feel like the game of basketball in a way is almost like figured out. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like, if Nikola Jokic was a prospect coming out now, he'd probably be a 1st round pick. He wouldn't be a 2nd round pick. His pick wouldn't be announced during a Taco Bell commercial, right? Like how it was when he was drafted. He would be a highly touted player, I think, coming out if he came out now. And so, again, my solution for the draft lottery reform, abolish it. Get rid of the draft lottery. Just do it like how every other sports league does it and just award the picks based on record. If you need to do something where it's like, hey, you know what? You can't have the 1st pick 3 years in a row. That's fine, right? You move backwards a pick or whatever. I think that's fine. And hey, you can't pick in the top 3 years in a row. Okay, you move back a little bit then, right? There's guards that you can put in to make sure there's not a lot of shenanigans going on. I think the reason why you saw so much tanking is a lot of teams were out of it, right? A lot of teams had a lot of injuries, right? And, I think a lot of that comes down to the pace of play, which the league has embraced the quicker pace of play over the past couple of years. I think they've added rules to make the pace of play even quicker. I think the league should maybe look into trying to slow the game back down a little bit. Personally, I think the one real solution that could solve a lot of this is potentially, reducing the schedule down, shaving off 10, 20 games, 10 to 15 games. They're not going to shave off 20 games, I don't think. I don't think that's something the NBA would ever do. I think they should, honestly. I think you could shave off the month of April from the schedule, and I don't think anyone would particularly care. Right? If you get rid of all the games in April, I don't think anyone would particularly be that upset. If you just started the playoffs right at when April started, I can check my phone right here. I have it on my hand. This is the power of the internet. NBA schedule. Let me check. You know what? I'll do this for my team, the Milwaukee Bucks. Bucks schedule. April. What was their schedule looking like in April? How many games did the Bucks play in April? That's not what I want. Okay, so we can go right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We could lob off 7 to 10 games here off the schedule. We go from 82, we get down to 70. Let's get down to straight 7. Let's get 12 games off the schedule. We go to 70, right? Would that really hurt anything? The playoffs start in mid-March. Football's out of the way. You got the playoffs. The playoffs probably get done, a little bit right at what the finals would be, like right around now, right around May, late May? Would that really be that bad? Right? And then you can have the draft in June. Boom. You know what I mean? Like, there you go. Get a couple games off of the schedule. Let's reduce the amount. If you're so insistent on the game having this high pace action, right? These guys are up and down, up and down, up and down the court so much now. I think that's what's causing so many of those injuries that you see in the regular season. So I guess this is a multi-part segment, me talking about lottery reform and the schedule. These are all things people, don't like about the NBA right now. I think I think a lot of fans do actually want to see the NBA kind of get rid of, the lottery. No other sport kind of does this to this level, I think. Or, these are the two sports people really care about the drafts, I think, are basketball and football. Again, for the draft, get rid of the lottery, just award it to whoever. Again, you can have safeguards in there, like I mentioned. And for the schedule, get 12 games off of the schedule, go to 70, reduce the amount of back-to-back nights. You know what I mean? And I think you'll have a better league. I think everyone will be slightly more happy about the NBA, because right now right now it's great in the playoffs, right? It's great because we are watching the best teams go back and forth with each other. That's awesome. Everything else, once we get back to the regular season, everyone's like, ugh, this is the stuff I don't like about the league. And I think the NBA right now should be looking to limit the amount of things people are like, oh, this is what I don't like about the league right now. This is what I don't like about the NBA. Start reducing those things instead of adding on top of them. I feel like Adam Silver takes the wrong lesson whenever he looks at Twitter. He's like, let me add on top of these things so people keep talking about. Instead, let's reduce the amount of things people don't like about the NBA and that they end up tweeting about. Let's start taking some of those things down here. Let's start pleasing the customer, the fan, a little bit here, in my opinion. So that's all I got for this edition of the Mike Chase show. It's not much of a show, but you have to call it a show, I feel like. So I don't know. I'm not sure when I'll be back. These are going to be infrequent, just when I find the time to do it. But I do have fun doing this, kind of running my mouth, talking sports. These will be in shorts. These will be in clips, whatever. So if you see it there, cool. Hit subscribe, like, whatever. I don't really give a shit if you do or not. But if you enjoy it, great. Will anyone ever see this? I don't know. Who knows? I might stop doing this one day, or who knows? We'll look back on this and be like, wow, this was really terrible at one point. How did he end up figuring it out? I don't know. But if I do, great. If I don't, oh well. If not, if I never see you again, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time for more Mike Chase show. That feels really weird to say, but yeah.